Hello, everyone, and we are here with Jason Stoddard of Schiit Audio and Dan Clark of Dan Clark Audio, and they have a new deal that they want to express to you guys. So I'm gonna, without further ado, you guys go ahead and take it away and let me know what you guys have going on this year.
Oh boy, what are we calling this? The sizzling summer stack or something like that?
Well, given the rate of climate change, sizzling summer's probably apropos.
It's
That's
been
kind of
quite
more like that's becoming a little bit more of a timeless name.
yeah. It's been hot here, so let's just call it that. Let's see. It is to define actually what's in it. It is a mid guard, one of our newest amps. That's quite high power, quite high measurement. The Modius E, which is one of our DACs, also one of the high measuring products, and Dan Clark's Aeon RT headphone closed, which all of Dan's stuff measures great. Ours, we we will do whatever you would like to buy, or to be less capitalistic about it. We do some stuff that measures very good, and we do some stuff that measures very poorly. The poor stuff is usually on the tube side of things. Some people like the way it sounds. Some of the guys who work with us like the way it sounds. So we do both. But in this case, it's a whole stack of stuff that's all kind of high measurement, high performance, and we are also throwing in all the balanced cables you need to connect everything. So no surprise, you can connect the DAC and the amp and the headphones, and they're all XLR type cables. So it's all done, all ready to go. You get that full stack for $749, and which is a pretty good deal if you look up what the normal prices are. So I think that's the horrible corporate crap out of the way, isn't
Could
it?
put could put your EIN number in if you want to add a little pointless corporate crap.
Uh, No, that's all right. We're we're getting close to starting to hire for San Antonio, so it's been a busy summer. Let's just put it that way.
And you guys have your power back on, and that's all.
Never lost power. We lost internet yesterday. We got a hilarious thing from Spectrum saying they had a internet outage in the Texas area. It's like all of it, in the Texas area. Anyway. But yeah, it was bad. I think that was because Houston got hit by a hurricane, and this is probably one of the after effects of it. So all fun stuff. You guys get to enjoy the great weather. We get to have some Texas wine.
Yeah, it's nice. It's cloudy and 72 degrees out today here.
Yeah, well, it's cloudy and 87 right now.
Well,
Not
by
too bad.
by Texas standards, that's a pretty cool day.
It's pretty typical for on the island, but it's humid too. So it's fun. I like a lot of places. I find it fun here. Other people would not. Um, so choose where you're happy is what I tell everyone when they're like, "I can't believe you live there." It's like it amuses me. This is a great place.
Yeah, see, for me, I'm a bicyclist, and so San Diego has the benefit of being, one of the few places on the planet where it's like legitimately comfortable to bicycle all year round.
Yeah, and you have a train too. Yeah, you have a real train system.
Yeah, we
So
we have a train. The track's about half a mile from my office here.
there you go.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of big white trucks, and other smaller cars too. But that's Texas. And in LA, you had a kind of the world's shortest subway, and lots of Ubers. So yeah, it worked ish. Anyway,
Yeah.
but we digress. I think we were going to talk measurements a bit, since all this stuff is kind of measurementy, and if you put it on an analyzer, it's going to look good. Um, And that's something you can't say for all of our stuff. If if it's tube gear, maybe not, but actually, Midgard is kind of performing at the very highest level. It's almost 120 dB or minus 120 dB THD plus N. The DAC, I think, is more like 112, 115, something like that. Dan's headphones, transducers are way different than electronics. So
Yeah, some of our the RT doesn't do that. The RT's distortion's higher than, of course, the top of the line headphones. But like headphones like our Expanse and our Stealth actually, in parts of the mid range, can get down below 0.008% THD, which actually means that when we put them on the analyzer, if there are problems with the amplifiers or DACs or anything upstream, we actually can see those dominating the distortion from the transducers, which is pretty cool because there aren't many transducers in the world that'll do that.
oh yeah, if I gave you a Valley 3, which in high gain is about 0.3 or 0.4%, you would absolutely see that. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. You wouldn't even see the headphone until it's probably up at about 100 and 110 dB would be when the headphones start to get over that level.
And that's got to be up at several volts RMS, I'd expect.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
yeah, that's a lot, and yeah, it is really interesting. I mean, the transducers are usually an order of magnitude or two orders of magnitude, worse than any electronics. But in your case, you are kind of pushing it down into realms that I haven't seen them before anyway.
Yeah, and the RT and Aeon line will be, typically higher. They'll be, more characteristic will be, we'd specify like 0.1% at 94 dB. Um, they'll often be lower than that, but there's some variance. And so we spec it conservatively so that everything falls under the worst case parameter.
Yeah, and that's
Yeah.
that's what we do too. But a lot of people think like everything's the same. It does vary. It's one of those things. We have less variance in electronics,
Yeah,
but
yeah, we have to worry about things like tension and uh, temperature and uh, humidity. It's like these things actually can all affect the measurements. It's
yeah.
interesting, like, even working with, stuff a lot of people don't realize is uh, I also have a big PA system that I use for festivals. And
Hmm.
it turns out that, things like something most people don't realize is horns are sensitive to ambient conditions, to the point where when we take our system from sea level to 4,000 feet, we have to retune it because the compression drivers won't be balanced with the rest of the system anymore.
That's funny because actually that makes sense, physics wise, but it's something that you don't think about.
Yeah. Yeah. Until I had a system like this, I hadn't really realized it was a thing. And, it's like, it actually probably says there are some minor differences that people who live in, for instance, Colorado would experience in the exact same system that you would have where you are because you're at sea level with humidity versus 3% humidity at 7,000 feet. And it's just, like horns, of course, the whole idea is what you're doing is you're increasing the coupling of the horn to the air mass to improve efficiency. And if the air mass's density uh, is changed by humidity and pressure, then the loading is not going to be the same.
Yeah, yeah, it's funny. I never thought about that until you mentioned it. But you actually deal with physical things, so you're
Yep.
more used to, yeah. Uh, we deal with components, electronic components, and it's like pretty much these days, pretty much any DAC you make should be able to measure, at least pretty well, and if not exceptionally well. And if it measures pretty well, it's probably because you're doing something like doing a multi-bit design, which we do some of. Even those you can get to minus 100, or so, 102 THD plus N, and you can get dynamic range, 20 dB higher than that with what is considered to be an antiquated approach on any modern, ESS type DAC, anything done with Delta Sigma, you should be down at 110, 120, all day. So that's really easy, and it's very replicatable, except for the tuning needed by the individual DAC. Usually DACs will have some distortion compensation that you can play with and improve the measured response. Oddly enough, it's funny. It doesn't really seem to correlate with sound in our experience, but that I don't, Dan. I don't know how correlatable your distortion measurements are with how things sound, but sometimes our stuff is really difficult to nail down.
Yeah, I've talked with some people who purport to be golden ears who claim they can hear, 0.001% distortion and, can hear the difference between individual samples of tubes and that
Heard
measure
them.
the same. And, it's like, okay, perhaps they can. I don't claim to. I generally, I start to be able to hear distortion on some um, uh, products or components when we're at the like above the zero point 0.1 or 0.2% level. And at that point, stuff becomes, you can begin to hear a little bit of a change. But,
Mm.
it depends on the nature of the distortion, whether it's even or odd, harmonic, and or intermodulation. Intermodulation's a little bit easier to hear.
Yeah, well, a lot easier for us anyway. And intermodulation or non-harmonic, if it actually is oscillating or it's doing something like it really shouldn't be doing, it's pretty easy to hear. Or at crossover, if it's not biased correctly, it's usually pretty easy to hear that. But those are pretty
Yeah.
gross. Those are big numbers. That's 1% or higher.
Yeah, and like stuff. The neat thing is, like with the little Midgard stack we have for this package, they, clearly the electronics, the noise and distortion contributions are just well below what the headphone is, and that's pretty neat because from that perspective, they're just not adding anything to the signal, and um, at the most basic level, I think "Thou shalt not harm the signal integrity" is rule
Yeah.
number one. I've never been much of a person for EQ or anything else that manipulates the system.
Oh, don't talk bad about EQs. We sell those, but no, it's fine. I typically don't use EQ either. We kind of brought back some analog EQs because people do like them, but then again, they're not as flexible as digital EQ. And then there's the question of the artist's intent, and but then there's also the question: how good is the recording?
Yeah,
I
there's always tons of that.
Yeah, I have some old '80s stuff that really just does not have anything below like about 100 hertz. It needs a little help, to make it sound even slightly modern. So I do use EQ for that, but typically it's off.
Yeah, that's one of those things which it really surprised me when I was, for a long time. I know this isn't true of most people. Most people, apparently, the science actually says that most people kind of stop listening to new music after they leave high school.
Hmm.
And as a result, their musical knowledge just sort of like freezes in time,
Yeah.
and that never happened to me. I kind of moved on and on and on, and you know only periodically go back to the high school music I loved, and so often when I do, I listen to it and I'm like, where's all the bass? you
Yeah,
know
where is it? Yeah, same exact reaction here. I mean, when I had started picking CDs out of a rack to try our new CD player when we did it, like, wait a minute, did it always sound this kind of thin, and or did we actually not flag a de-emphasis bit or something? No, it's just like, no, that's what they sounded like.
Yeah, it's like I went back and I listened to Michael Jackson's Thriller, and back in the day, he had a not, he had a reputation as being like the audiophile pop star, right?
Yeah,
And it's like, okay, it's really squeaky clean and bright,
bright, bright,
bright, bright,
and just
bright.
nothing going on. And you listen to any modern, any modern music period, but any modern, especially electronic, it's like, oh, that's what bass is supposed to do. Got it.
Yep.
But yeah,
Yeah. Or, even there's just like lots of really good rock albums and
yeah,
stuff that have come out, and just the way bass is handled now is just so fundamentally different, and it sounds a lot more live to me, and
mhm,
it feels better too. It's more impactful whether it's through speakers or headphones. But it is funny how the notion of what is reference and audiophile had changed so much over time. And the fact that the music you used to love and listen to now just sounds tonally just so wrong.
yeah, I know but I concur. I think it does sound more accurate. The way things are mastered today, you can complain about a lot of things, whether it's compression or whatever, but it in general, tonally, it sounds more like live. It sounds more real.
Yeah.
um, now we're going to have everyone go, well, if you go back to the RCA Shaded Dog mono records, it's like, yeah, that's nice. um, I They're not recording modern music, so
I did once have an experience where I went to a demo of a audio system where uh, they had lovingly restored this vintage mono system, and I was like, okay, I'll give this a try.
yeah.
I came in, and there's this one like 14-inch coaxial driver in a big baffle powered by some tube gear, and I'm like, okay, there's nothing above 8 kilohertz and there's nothing below about 80,
Mhm.
and there's no sound stage and no dynamics, and just distortions off the curve. Why are you guys all so infatuated with this? What is it that appeals?
Yeah, it's funny because we must like listen at least somewhat similarly, because I've had the same reaction to that. I've even had some people tell me, well, really the most accurate thing ever done was the 78, because it doesn't have an RIAA curve. I'm like, have you ever actually listened to a 78? Like any of them? And they're like, well, if they're really good, I'm like, dude, they put actual sand, they put grit in it to grind the needle to the right shape. It's like they have a little bit of a noise floor problem. So anyway, yeah, just to be polite. Um, Now, if you love listening to the 78s, I'm not crapping on you. It's like, enjoy your music, but it's like to say, oh, that's the pinnacle of accuracy. No, I don't think so.
Yeah, for me, I have landed pretty solidly in the digital camp. I
Yeah,
just the uh, yeah, if you give me like a 30-inch per second analog master on, that's going to sound pretty amazing. I've heard amazing high speed tape
yeah,
masters in the day.
yes.
But if I'm not listening to the original tape, I don't see where generations of extra distortion and signal conversions and stuff can possibly add anything good.
I I don't know, but actually, to kind of correlate that to measurements in a really funny way, we have one guy at the shop here who's beyond phono centric. He's like, phono, phono, phono. This is the way to go. This is great. He was so excited when we did the Skull, which is our higher end phono preamp, to go above Manny, and he tried it and he's like, oh, this thing is so much better. And it measures better than Manny in a lot of respects. I mean, in fact, it has above 100 dB signal to noise at 40 dB a gain, which is completely bonkers for a
That's
phono
pretty
preamp.
crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we did a prototype of another one that was even crazier, and it was like almost 110 at 40 dB. And this thing was truly heroic, like 800 parts, ran as hot as a toaster. And he said, "Oh, now this is truly, absolutely beyond the pinnacle of pinnacles." And I'm like, I should do a tube one just to see. And a tube phono preamp is going to measure horribly. I mean, just absolutely awful. So I did this thing that I think at 40 dB, it might be in the low 80s, as far as THD plus N. It might not be quite that good. And he took it home. He's like, now this is the absolute, the best, the perfection, so far beyond, this high measurement thing you did. I'm like, okay, I guess that's the one we're making. Uh, because we had a bunch of other people listen to it too, and they're like, "This is really fantastic." I'm like, "Okay, that's what you want. Then I'll be very happy to do it. It'll be very expensive. It won't be as good as a skull. I'd buy a skull, but yeah, that's me."
The funny thing for me is I do love, I because we have the gear, we measure stuff,
Yeah,
and I've taken all of my tube equipment and I've measured it, and I've taken all my solid state gear and I usually measure all of it.
yeah,
Periodically, I just throw it on the machine when I'm a little questioning about it, just to make sure everything's staying tracking. And sometimes I'll find, oh, one channel's gone bad on something. But
yep.
the odd thing for me is that I actually, even though the tube gear never measures as well, I still have tube gear in my equipment that I love and listen to a lot. And it gets
Hmm.
equal time with the better measuring solid state. And the thing for me is the biggest difference you always, of course, see in the measurements between tube and solid state is straight out noise and distortion.
Hmm.
Um, but I can hear the distortion and I know what that contribution is, but that's not usually what I enjoy about the tube experience. And the tube experience, at least with some of my gear, has uh, um, a better, a deeper sense of soundstage and field in many cases. And I just really love the way that plays as an experience. And so is it technically as good? Well, I mean, I guess if you're listening for the distortion attributes and things like that, it probably is not. But as an experience, it's just so enjoyable. And it also makes acoustic instruments just sound more live and unamplified than solid state does.
Yep, and concur. I usually do end up coming back to tubes from solid state. I'm The quality of tubes. I really do wish I had a better way to define what tubes do. I mean, they do have a specific quality. But what that is hard is very hard to describe. Um, Sometimes you can probably you sorry what we can absolutely say for sure is tubes are more linear devices. They run over a longer voltage range. They just don't have a lot of gain. You can't really run a lot of feedback around tubes, because the game to get measurements is usually throw a lot of feedback at a solid state amplifier. They have tons of gain. You throw away a lot of the gain with feedback. You get a very good measuring amp. Tubes don't have a lot of gain. A typical tube stage will have a gain of 10 or 20 or 30, or if it's a super high gain tube, maybe 50 or so. That's not a lot, and it's not a lot to play with. So it's very common to see tube amps have very low feedback or no feedback, and yet they still produce pretty decent measurements, given that you're really not linearizing anything. Is there something to that? Is that the tube magic? I can't say that it is, but there's something about tube amps that I can't really define.
Yeah, and that always goes into the realm of the things that we can measure and the things that we can't measure. It's like for me the analog is soundstage in headphones.
Hmm.
It's like I can't measure it. I have theories about how to enhance it. We've done some things with our AMTS that improve the experience, but I can't measure what was done to do that.
Yeah, and kind of same here, because some people on the electronic side, it's a lot of people correlate soundstage with essentially separation. How good is your stereo separation? It's like it doesn't really correlate. We have stuff that's minus 118 dB. I mean, when one channel's off, the other channel's off, and we have some stuff that's as bad as 60 or 70 dB, and has a better soundstage. I've had, I've heard phono systems that have maybe 25 or 30 dB of separation, and they have fantastic soundstage. So it's not that, but unfortunately, I can't tell you what it is. So I think both Dan and I would love to know what the heck it is. It's got to be phase in some way or another, but or at least part of
Well,
it.
I mean, from our research, some of it seems to be, the way the pressure wave approaches the ear and couples to the ear.
Hmm.
But, again, I don't have any way to measure it. So I think we have a conceptual handle on it, and we know how to manipulate it and enhance the experience to a degree. But to be able to measure it and say, ha ha, that did it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and if that's the case, though, then it's probably also a little different between people, depending on ear shape.
yeah.
Oh boy. Yeah, and that takes me back to my old point of people have asked us, like, well, why can't you like have an analyzer that basically gives you a sound quality measurement? It's like this is 99.8% and this other is 99.9, or whatever, based on a sound quality metric. And I always ask, whose? You know, yours, mine, average? Because average is kind of useless. Yours might be useless to me, or it sounds like we hear somewhat the same. But there's really no getting around. You kind of have to listen to things and decide what you like. And
Yeah,
I
and
wish,
at the end of the day, things like from a measurement perspective, for the headphones, we are necessarily limited to one of basically two major coupler options. You can use a Gross, um, or you can get one of the newer generation 5128s. But either way, they kind of represent a ear acoustic impedance profile.
mhm,
And if you look at the data on actual acoustic impedance of people's ear canals, they're just all over the place. I mean, they all basically have the same shape, but they cover a pretty sizable range.
mhm.
And so you can only rely on the couplers to a certain degree because they represent a snapshot out of many possibilities. And because that like that acoustic impedance has a big effect, particularly between like 7 and 11 kilohertz or 7 and 12 kilohertz. It creates voids and peaks for people in different places, and it will have also different couplings with the different headphones that'll have different acoustic impedances of their own. So you do get different experiences. That said, and also people, play around with positioning and where the headphones are
Yeah,
on their head, and you can do that on a fixture, and you can see the measurements will be affected significantly by positioning, which is why some measurement shops will do 5 position seating averages to try and get a
yeah,
general view. And then others will take well, I'm going to do a single measurement because when you're listening, that's what you're experiencing. You don't have 5 ears at a time averaging. And so and when you do that, you can actually see a lot of variations. Now the interesting thing is in our Aeon line, we don't get much variation due to positioning because the shape of
right.
the ear pad is so tightly, is so well fitted to the ear that
Mhm.
the range of position is just very small and has virtually no effect on measurement.
Mhm.
The bigger headphones with the AMTS have another interesting artifact or aspect to them, which is that the AMTS actually makes it so that you can kind of predict, based on where people put their ears within the ear cavity, the change in the sound. And
Huh.
so we actually can give guidance to people that says if you want your headphone to be a bit brighter, move your ear toward the center in the ear pad.
Hmm.
If you want it to be a little softer, pull the headphone down and slightly forward to bring your ear to the back of the pad. And you can verify it on
Huh.
measurement systems, and it's actually 100% repeatable with consumers and users. That's actually neat to be able to have a predictable positioning effect because then you can help people actually get the experience they want.
That's actually really neat. Yeah, one thing I do like about the Aeons is like they're on, you're good, you're done. But yeah, I do like your Expanse quite a bit better. um, and I do listen so they're slightly brighter. So yeah, it is interesting, and yours are controllable, unlike some other large headphones that shall remain nameless that are kind of hard to figure out where they're supposed to be, or if there's any rhyme or reason to that. Yeah, no, I don't know, but it's really fun. It's nice to actually have some flexibility because if you buy speakers, you can do room treatments, you can move speakers around, you can compensate for that. A lot of headphones, you just don't get any choice. It's like it is great or horrible.
Yeah, that's right. And when you combine that with the fact that people have different physical ear structures and also different levels of hearing acuity or hearing loss, having the ability to position and place is great because that way you can cover a wider range of preferences.
What do you mean? My hearing is perfect. We both have perfect hearing after these
Well, when I
days.
was a kid, I could hear to 25,000 hertz.
I
And
was I
we
was
lived
never
in a
able.
3-story house, and the old 17 kilohertz flyback transformer on the Sony TV.
Yeah.
I could be down in my bedroom with the door shut, and when
Hmm.
the TV was on, I couldn't hear the TV, but I could hear the flyback transformer. It used to make me crazy with this 17 kilohertz that I could hear all through the house, even with shut doors. Now I
Yeah.
can't hear that.
Yeah, it's actually, yeah, and I believe, and it might be the flyback, but the horizontal scanning was 15,750 hertz, and yeah, I could hear that plain as day. Now I can still hear it, if it was loud enough, but I'm not going to hear it from across the
Yeah,
house
you can hear
anymore.
it if you're like up close, you know.
Yeah, and that's why you have other people to listen to your stuff to make sure that you're not crazy, because as we age, at some point when you can't hear that high, you probably want to make sure there's that other people think that it's still good. I've heard some gear which also shall remain nameless. It's like I guess you're not having young people listen to this because this is bright as heck.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, that is definitely a thing, and there are people who have uh, a strong preference for brighter
Mhm.
equipment for just that reason.
Yep.
Sometimes they don't realize that that's why they have the preference for brighter equipment because they don't realize it's brighter equipment. And I have had some times when somebody like took umbrage because I said, well, this is a pretty bright piece of gear, and they're like, it sounds just like live cymbals to me, and I'm like, it
If
sounds like live cymbals to you that you used to hear 20 years ago. Yes.
Yeah.
It
Yeah. And if you
got
sit
that sparkling air.
and if you sit 10 feet away from live cymbals for long enough, yeah, you're going to need that brightness. Uh,
Yeah. And the other thing is, I mean, I do this. I think I may have mentioned this in one of our past tapes, but I like going into music shops and actually playing percussion.
hmm.
Not that I'm a percussionist, but I do it because I just want to keep my memory fresh about what unamplified, unmiked
Yeah.
acoustic sounds like, because that to me is my reference. And like a snare drum and a couple of different cymbals can cover enough of the spectrum that I can hear something's tonally balanced or not by whether it sounds like that experience.
Yeah.
Um, and
That.
and it's like surprisingly, cymbals are not bright like they are often recorded.
Yeah.
A lot of cymbals have, I like to say they have a tang
Yeah.
sound instead of a
Yeah.
sound. And when you listen live, there's no question, these are not sparklingly bright in your face. They don't effervesce. And
No.
when you listen to a lot of stereo gear, it does,
Very true. And yeah, the sibilance and yeah, the symbol test, that's one of the things that you can use to expose gear that's not all that great. It's it is strange that you should be able to even hear that difference on electronics, because everything we make is dead flat, right? I mean, electronics just don't vary as far as frequency response very much. So they should all be the same, but somehow they are not. I love it when people say, "Well, this is really rolled off." I'm like, perceptually, maybe, but it's not. I mean, I can show you it's flat to 500 kilohertz, but it is not rolled off.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite pieces of gear is kind of blurred out in the background here, but I my my three most consistently used pieces of equipment are my Mjolnir 3, um, my TT2 from Cord, and then an old Cavalli liquid glass,
Hmm.
um, which for a piece of tube hybrid gears, it measures down like 0.02% THD when I have good tubes in it. But the thing about it is that it measures flat, but it sounds like it's got an extra 2 dB of bass.
Yeah, yeah, and that's another one. It's like, why are there such stark differences down below when you're like, no, I measured it, it's flat. We're not bumping the bass, but
Yeah, and it measures flat no matter what load I put on it. If I put on an 8 ohm load or a 300 ohm load, it measures, flat just the same. And, sure, the distortion changes a little bit, but it's not changing that much, and so why does electronics that measure flat not sound the same, tonally is something that
oh, I wish I knew. That's another thing. But it's funny because it is correlated with certain things, like the Mjolnir with the choke input, power supply, or what Mike is doing with the Yggdrasil, but that also has a choke in it. It's kind of funny. It is somewhat correlated apparently with power supply, and then of course someone's going to say, "Hey, you need to do a blind test and do that." It's like, yeah, we probably do, and we probably will, and I like measurements. I like doing tests, but there's a point where you just need to sit back and listen and enjoy something.
yeah, well, we do actually a form of blind testing all the time. We will A B two headphones.
Hmm.
And what we like is to have an amplifier that has multiple outputs on it. Um, and then what we'll do is we'll get two headphones that are level matched, and we'll pass them back and forth to see if we can, hear the differences between them as part of the voicing process. And we won't know which is which. They're just going to have a number on them, and you just say, "Well, I hear this in one, and I hear this in two." And it's a standard part of our design process, and it's very fun and informative. Because we do that all the time, and we have done unsighted cable tests, and we had one and only one cable that I could reliably unsighted say, "Oh,
Really?
I know which cable that is," and it wasn't because I was picking up a cue like microphonics or weight or something.
Hmm.
So I did get 100% hit rate on that one test. But generally, when I've tried to do blind cable testing, that hasn't filled me with tons of confidence either.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Right now, almost everything we do, if it's a augmentation of a current product, we will usually do more than one candidate design. And those designs will then go into black boxes that are taped up, and everyone gets to listen to them, because people have very strong opinions about things that they already they know. Well, the Nexus version is going to be the good one, or fill in the blank. This version is going to be the good one, and we get some really interesting data that way because it does seem to correlate, and a lot of times it's a surprise. The people who thought they knew what it was did not, and actually have strong feelings for something that they would not have picked if if the PC board was exposed. They could look at it and see what I had done. So
So, other than your phono preamp example, did you have an interesting case of something where you thought something that measured objectively worse was objectively or was subjectively preferred by your crew?
We actually have we have both, but the most recent was the opposite. We actually had two very high measuring devices. One was performing at about minus 116 level. The other one was like, it was way up there. It was the best measuring thing we've ever done, like minus 122. And now both these are discrete designs. One of them, has the nice, a nice kind of label stuck on it. One of our marketing labels stuck on it because it's a redo of something we've already done before. And everyone's like, "Well, that one's going to kill this other one." I don't even know why I'm bothering, to listen. And even I did the prototype of the revised version, the one revised version. I listened to it. I'm like, I don't even know why I'm bothering doing the other one, because it annihilates the current one, just completely lays waste to it. And so I said, but I've got the board, might as well build it. I built it up, and I did a sighted listen to it, and I'm like, huh, it's interesting. It wasn't a clear distinction. It was actually flavors, which is the most horrible thing. But I said, okay, put them in boxes, tape them up, let everyone, have a listen. And every single person picked the one that they thought they wouldn't like, which was the higher measuring one. So in this case, the measurements won, but that's unusual because actually a lot of the high measuring stuff that we've done is not picked. It is more typical that the low measuring stuff is picked, and that's why people will gravitate towards tubes or to lower feedback type designs. And what was interesting about this is both of them were like low feedback slash maybe 6 dB of overall feedback with like a nested loop that had just maybe 30 dB total in it. But one performed a lot better and sounded a lot better, and that was not expected. So that's what will go into production eventually. Once we figure out, yeah, yeah. Once we figure out San Antonio, we got to digest that and get that operational, which we should be producing there by September safely. They keep saying August, but I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah, we have found that for us, the obviously the dominant measurement is naturally frequency response because in transducers that's the 800-pound gorilla.
Yeah.
If you can't get the tonality right, what else matters?
Yeah.
But we have found that now that we've kind of um, generally follow the Harmon curve, that measurements that fit the Harmon curve within a couple of dB uh, can have very different sounds,
Huh.
but still sound natural, which is kind of interesting. Like you can, and part of it is going to relate to how listeners listen. What level people listen at, because what'll happen is like headphones that we for people who are listening at lower levels, having an increased emphasis on the bass and the higher frequencies actually is going to sound neutral.
Mm-hmm.
So like if you're listening to 75 dB and if you're listening to 95 dB on the same headphone, they're just not going to sound tonally the same.
Yep.
Or it won't sound tonally the same. And so, by making subtle variations in the headphones, we are able to appeal to people who listen at different levels. And that's one of the things which, I wish the community at large perceived and understood more, and also reviewers, is most reviewers never mention the volume they're listening at. I calibrate myself and I listen typically between 75 to 85 dB. I'll
Mm-hmm.
listen, it's like 75 if I'm just tootling along and working. I'll be listening more like 85 if I'm doing extended listening for product development. If I'm, deep in voicing, I may turn it up to 95 dB
Mm-hmm.
peaks, not not average.
Right.
But the tonal balance shifts, and so uh, a headphone like E3 may sound a little better to some people at lower levels than Stealth might, because it has a little bit more of an emphasis on some of the upper registers and the bass.
Yeah, if there was one control that I would bring back, if you said, okay, from all the antique audio or from all the older audio that you've had, what
Loudness.
one loudness, 100%.
What I'd
I
love to see would be a modern take on it, which would be dynamic loudness, which relates to program level.
Yes,
You know,
and that is actually it is interesting. We are working on a product that will have adjustable dynamics on the digital side of things. So that's a whole different trick in itself. That's highly algorithmic based, and you can say it's fake or whatever. But considering it's also going to be doing pitch shifting and a bunch of other stuff, it's like, hey, this is not about artist intent. This is about like what you want to hear. So
this is not your purist product.
it is not your purest product, and that's fine. There's room for everyone. I totally understand, wanting to be, wanting to have a purist product, and probably 95% of my listening is no tone controls and no funny business. But it's also weird to see what affects dynamics in a product, and there's some weird correlations you wouldn't expect, like actually tube heater voltage is highly correlated. uh, if the heater voltage is low, tubes tend to sound a little like weak or strained, or
Huh.
yeah, it's really funny and undynamic. And then you turn it up, and it comes alive. And then if you understand the physics of tubes, it's like, yeah, the electron cloud is smaller. It has less to work with. It's not going to be the same thing. So that was a huge shock when we discovered that a few years ago. And I'm like, why is this not really sounding the way it should? And I went,
So
oh,
you
it's got
basically you want your heater white hot?
no, no, no. You
Run
can
those
go too
6 volt
high too.
tubes
I
at
mean,
12.
yeah, no. Yeah, and to be clear, to anyone out there who's running our tube gear, that doesn't mean crank up the tube voltage, the heater voltage to like 7 volts or anything like that. Run it at what it's supposed to be, 6 volts, 6.3. I'm talking like 5 volts. When it was like this little starved, it just didn't sound right at all. 6 to 6.3 is fine, and yeah, if you want to run a 6 volt tube at 12, yeah, have fun with that. Just please don't do it in our gear.
Yeah,
That's not.
one of the little things with the liquid glass is it has 6 and 12 volt settings, as well as
Yeah,
200 and 300 volt.
yeah.
And
I'm
I
familiar with that product. I'm a little jealous of it, actually. So,
it is one of the most fun pieces of gear I have. I literally ended up spending thousands of dollars on all these different tubes, and ultimately ended up buying a tube tester just so I could use this thing and have matched tubes in it. But it's so fun. But I did once put a 6 volt tube in with the 12 volt heater setting on, and I looked over and I saw the thing glowing white, and I'm like, ah! Those tubes were cooked before I could even turn it off.
one thing I do love about tubes is they will take a beating, because it probably survived that, didn't it?
No, one of them
Oh,
just became a noise factory.
too bad. Okay. Yeah. Now, I've had tubes that have gone like, red plate, where the whole interior is glowing red. Not the heater, but like the plate. And it's like, oh yeah, that's fine. I've cooled down. I'm working now. So don't try that with MOSFETs, JFETs, any modern stuff. It's not as forgiving. So, I know it seems like we beat measurements to death, because we got listening, we got subjective. Are we good?
I think we might be. Yep.
Yeah. So to get back to the stack, I mean, yeah, we got a great measuring stack, a great price. If that makes your summer a little hotter, or actually a little cooler, because actually this stuff does not run that hot, guys. I know we have a reputation for doing hot running gear. This is not some of it.
Yeah. No. They're both very nice, cool running pieces. In fact, I've been using one of the mid guards in my measurement box because it's so cool and I can leave things running for long periods of time without it bringing the box temperature up to 110 degrees.
Yeah. Unlike a Valhalla,
Yeah, right.
the worst measurement amp in the universe. I think it might actually still be at the bottom of the ASR chart. But yeah, it's truly horrible.
It's something you can take pride in.
And it's just funny. I'd love to have top and bottom, but top is a lot of effort. Bottom is probably a lot of effort too. So maybe we just make good sounding gear and not worry about it so much.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's nice to have a range of offerings, and it's like I think the worst thing you can do in the industry is assume that you know what the one thing that sounds good is, because in there are people who believe that what measures well sounds good, and that's all there
Mhm.
is to it. And okay, so make things that measure well for them. And there
Mhm.
are people who are interested in the subjective experience, and maybe part of that includes they just feel happy and warm inside when they see glowing tubes, and that makes them feel like the experience is better and they're happier, or they just, like we commented on earlier, just hear things like, the depth of field and some of the attributes that you get with tubes that we can't quantify, or we're not sure why they do that, but they do, and that's important to them. And so it's like you can't say what's right, just like I can't say where to seat your headphone exactly. But if you tell me what you like and don't like, I might be able to give you guidance to make the experience better. And if
Yeah.
I kind of see that as our job is to provide various flavors that are close enough together so you can say, yeah, I get that that's a Dan design, a DCA
Mhm.
design, and it has an inherently natural sound, but this one's more to my taste.
Yeah, and it sounds to me like the next thing we got to do is some tube package. So yeah, maybe in the future we'll figure out something to do with tubes. But for now, we have this fun, all balanced, summer synergy, summer no sorry, sizzling summer stack. God, it
And it's
hurts to say
balanced
it.
all the way through, which is kind of cool. I mean, there aren't too many discrete setups that you'll get at this price point that are going to be an end-to-end balanced, other than
Yeah,
like a buying a DAP.
that's true. That's true. Yeah. So I think we're good. I
All
think
right.
that I
Fun
think
as
we
always.
covered it.
Thanks,
Hopefully,
Jason.
hopefully some people love this, and we'll go from there. And we'll get you out here. We'll visit you sometime here soon, Dan.
Yeah, well, next time you're out in SoCal, take the train down.
Yeah, I know. I know.
If the
Uh,
bluffs don't collapse.
oh boy. Well, anyway, I think that'll do it.
Alrighty.
And
Thank
we'll
you,
talk
John.
to you soon. Yep.